여러분, 안녕하십니까? 그리고 주최측 여러분, 초청하여 주셔서 감사합니다. 참가하신 많은 분들과 중요한 말씀을 해주실 분들을 이 자리에 함께 할 수 있어서 특별히 Korean American으로서 영광스럽습니다. Wow. Thank you. I've been doing public speaking since I was 5 years old, and I have never been as nervous as I was just now speaking that to all of you. So thank you for your support. So what I'd like to do to start is to ask a question of all of you. I'd like you all to take 1 minute to think about what is one way that you have changed in the past 6 months. It doesn't have to be a big change. It could be a small change, like I wake up earlier in the morning now. Something simple. It doesn't have to be about work. And if you can't think of a story, that's okay too. You're not going to share this with anyone else, it's just for you. So what is one way that you have changed in the past 6 months? Just take a minute. How many of you were able to think of a story? Raise your hand if you were able to think of a story. Raise it high. Okay, many of you. For those of you who were able to think of a story, for how many of you was the experience easy? It was easy to change. Raise your hands if you thought it was easy to change. A few of you. Sometimes there are changes that can be simple. How many of you thought that the change was hard? Raise your hand if your change was hard. Very good. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Change is hard. And as we saw, it's not very common necessarily. So about maybe 2/3 of the room raised their hand when I asked if you could think of a story. Change is hard, but it's possible, even at the individual level. And when we start thinking about social change at a large scale, it's also possible, as we heard just now from Park Jin, and as I'm sure you all have stories about. So what I want to talk about is my own experiences with change. For the past 16 years, I've devoted my career to improving collaboration at a societal scale. I work with groups across different sectors, companies, nonprofit organizations, government agencies, philanthropy, even grassroots movements. And because I care about improving society as a whole, I'm particularly drawn to really hard, really big challenges. Over the past decade, I've had the privilege of working on several of them, as you can see here. And so they've ranged from helping or trying to help Wikipedia reach more people and become more diverse. They've included trying to work with the people of California and helping them with very difficult water issues there. They've included working with progressive activists across the country, trying to help them achieve their important goals. So I've had the opportunity to work on many changes, but I haven't been very successful. Of all of the projects I've worked on, we've done work that I and my colleagues are very proud of. There are some things that we were able to change, but in terms of the larger goal of sustainable, impactful, collective change, all of those projects were failures. It's hard for me to come here so far away to all of you and stand here on the stage and to admit that I wasn't able to succeed in those situations. But what I'd like to do is see if there is a lesson that I could share with all of you from those failures. And I think there is. I think there's a lesson that I first learned almost 20 years ago now from my mentor, a man named Doug Engelbart. And that continues to get reinforced every time I fail. The lesson is that none of us individually can make the kind of large-scale changes we need today in the world. We must make that change together, but we can only control ourselves individually. We can't control other people. Maybe that sounds obvious, but I've learned over the years that it is remarkably difficult to incorporate this lesson. I want to do my best to share what I've learned so far. So this is Doug Engelbart. This is me. This was taken almost 20 years ago. I look much younger back then. How many people here have heard of Doug Engelbart? Raise your hand if you've heard of Doug. Okay, so we have a few people. If you've heard of Doug, most likely you've heard of him because of the technology he invented. He invented many of the technology that we're all familiar with today. So hypertext, which is what the World Wide Web uses, graphical user interfaces, which is on all of our computers today, the computer mouse, which many people know about. Most people know Doug for the technologies he invented, but fewer people know why he invented that technology. And so what happened was, when he was 25 years old in the year 1950, he was looking at the world and he was trying to decide what he wanted to do. And he decided the problem and the challenge that the world is facing right now is digital technology. Digital technology, even then, was changing so fast, it was requiring the world to change as well. The problem was that the problems were getting harder faster than our ability to solve the problems. And the only way we were going to be able to change these problems was not individually. There was no single person who was going to be able to do it. It would have to happen together, collectively. Collectively, we would have to learn how to be smarter. And so we all understand today, almost 70 years later, what he meant by this. We look at the world right now, the problems that we're facing, global inequality, the fear of nuclear war, climate change. I can keep talking on and on and on about the challenges that we're facing, and they're actually getting more complex. They're getting even harder for us to solve. We have to do it together. And if we're going to do that together, we all have to learn how to change more quickly. And so the question is, how do we do that? Why do we behave the way we do? Well, when we think about behaviors, behaviors are what we do. And actually, researchers have shown that about 40% of all our behaviors are habits. We don't actually think about why we do them. We just do them because we're used to doing them. So what about the next 60%? Why do we do the other 60% of our behaviors? Well, there are really three things that are influencing them. The first are mindsets. Mindsets are what we think. They're in our heads, so they're invisible. And what's in our heads affect our actions. So let me give you an example. If I think that most people are good, then when I meet a stranger, I might be very friendly towards that stranger. If my mindset is most people are bad, I might be very cold and distant when I meet that stranger. So mindsets are really important. Values. Values are what we believe. I think the distinction between a mindset and a value is subtle, But to me, values are so ingrained in our hearts, they're beliefs that are so unshakable that we are never going to change them. And they also influence our behaviors. And finally, there are structures. So, for example, all of you are looking at me right now. I don't know if you want to be looking at me, but you are looking at me. And the reason you're looking at me is because I'm standing on the stage, and all of the lights are pointed at me, and all of the chairs are pointed in my direction. It's a structure. If we change the structure of this room, you might not be looking at me anymore. So structures are really important. And actually, when we talk about collective change, global change, changing the structures is the most impactful way to create large-scale change. The problem is that in order to create structural change, you have to have power. And we don't always have that power. And so that's difficult. So in summary, we can change our habits, we can change our mindsets, we can change structures, but change is hard. And once again, I'm reminded of a story. This was one of my favorite stories that Doug Engelbart used to share with me. It was a story from when he was a kid. And he liked to do bicycle tricks in the neighborhood with his brother. And so they would get on their bicycles and they would challenge the other kids to do a bicycle trick. And they would try to get the other kids to fall off their bikes. Well, Doug had one bicycle trick that always worked, and it was very simple. He would say, try to ride your bike with your arms crossed, holding the handlebars, okay? So if you ride a bike, normally our hands are like this. We're holding the bike like this. And if we want to turn left, you use your left hand. And if you want to turn right, you use your right hand. So if your arms are crossed, how do you ride your bike? It's simple, right? It's easy. All you do is if you want to turn left, you use your right hand. If you want to turn right, you use your left hand. It should be very easy, but it's not easy. And the reason it's not easy is because of our habits. We're used to riding the bike one way. And even though our minds say, I want to turn left, I want to use this hand, but not that hand, our bodies are not used to it. And so when he would challenge the other kids, they would always fall off the bikes. Change is hard, right? But that's not the moral of this story. The moral of this story is that Doug was able to do these bicycle tricks. He was able to do these bicycle tricks because he practiced. He practiced over and over and over and over again. He repeated it. He fell off his bike over and over again. He got up and he tried again. All of that failure, all of that repetition, those are the things that lead to success, that lead to lasting change. About 6 years ago, in the context of my work, I was remembering this story. I was feeling frustrated about the lack of impact. I was trying to decide how things should be different. And I realized one of the challenges that we have when we're doing work together is the lack of practice, the lack of repetition. And so I created a program called Collaboration, Muscles, and Mindsets. And so if you think about collaboration, how we work together, collaboration is not just one thing. Collaboration is many different muscles. For example, listening. Listening is a very important part of collaboration. I was so touched and moved by the story that Park Jin shared about Hwang Sung-gi and about how he kept saying over and over again, no one is listening, no one is listening. We see this so common in society. And what's even more challenging is it's hard to listen to even the people who are our partners, who are our families, who are the people we're trying to work together. So listening is a muscle. And there are many other muscles that contribute to collaboration. And as it turns out, you can get better at doing these things by repeating it over and over and over again. And so like a muscle, I decided we can improve the muscles by exercising them, by doing workouts. And so I created this program. It's a 16-week program. People pair up with one other person, and they do exercises once a week to try and exercise their collaboration muscles. And they do an assessment at the beginning of the program and at the end of the program to track how much progress they're making. And the results have been promising. So for example, I was working with climate change activists working in the Midwestern United States. They're trying to replace 100% of dirty energy with clean energy over the next 30 years, so they're looking long term. And what they realized was they weren't collaborating effectively with each other. They were all trying to achieve the same goal, but it wasn't working. And so they wanted to try this program to see if it would improve the collaboration. And so we did an assessment, and we determined there were a series of muscles that they could improve, and we designed a set of exercises for them to try. By the way, I'm going to be doing a special session in the afternoon where I'm going to be leading some of these workouts. So you'll have a chance to experience what I actually mean by a collaboration workout if you come to the session in the afternoon. But for right now, one of the muscles that this group worked on was asking for help. Asking for help doesn't necessarily sound like it's a hard thing to do. You just ask, right? But as it turns out, asking for help is very difficult. And as it turns out, you can get better at asking for help just by practicing it over and over and over again. And so this group, we had about 20 people who participated in this, and they practiced over and over and over again, and we did an assessment. And so you can see at the beginning of the program, there were 3 people in the crawl stage, and there were several people in the walk stage. So crawl means you're not very good, and walk means you're okay. But what you really want to be able to do is you want to be able to run, or you want to be able to fly. So we're trying to move these people over here through exercise. And after 3 months, we succeeded. It turns out the repetition actually helped shift people over. And so finally, success, right? Well, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. You see, we only worked with 20 people. We didn't move everybody. We had good success, but not everybody. This was a network of hundreds, if not thousands, of activists who were trying to work together. So were enough people practicing? Were we trying this for enough amount of time? And was this even the right thing to practice? These were all questions that were really hard. And truthfully, 3 years later, I can't say that we actually made any long-term, successful, impactful change. So over the past few months, I've been kind of depressed thinking about my work and thinking about how can I actually make change? How can I actually achieve all of these things? And once again, I was reminded of my mentor who passed away 5 years ago. When I first met Doug about 20 years ago, I asked him, when you look around the room and when you see everybody using technology that you invented, how does that make you feel? And what he said to me was, I hate it. I hate it because I look around and all of these people have missed the point. My point was I was not trying to create interesting technology. I'm trying to make a world that's collectively smarter. And I don't think we're collectively smarter. And so Doug was depressed his entire life. He often described how he viewed society as society driving a very complex, large vehicle, like a car, and it was driving it off the cliff. And he was standing there, you could see him right here, and he was trying to say, stop, turn around, we need to fix this, but nobody was listening. I could understand how he felt. I could understand why he felt depressed about this. But when I heard that story, I didn't agree with him. I didn't think he was correct in his analysis. And part of the reason I didn't think he was correct was because of something that he had taught me and so many other people about collective intelligence, what it means to work together with other people. Again, when we talk about society's greatest challenges, we're talking about problems that are so complex, no single person can solve them. Only a group is able to solve those problems. And so let me give you an example of how to think about this using ants. Ants are not very smart compared to humans. I think it's safe for me to say that humans are much smarter than ants. Ants do two things well. They can lift up very heavy weights, and they leave and follow trails. And so they're seeing where all of the other ants are going. They're following the way the other ants are going. And then they're also leaving a signal to the other ants and telling them where they're going. And so all of the ants are flowing together. And what happens from that is they're able to create these amazing anthills, these structures. It's an emerging quality. No single ant is an architect for this. No single ant is telling the other ants what to do. They're just flowing together. That's what collective intelligence looks like. As a human being, I think it's very hard to act this way. We want to be in control. We think that that is the way that we're going to succeed. And we're trying to control everybody else because we think we have the right answer and everyone else has the wrong answer. And that's not how collective intelligence works. That's what creates all of the friction. Thinking about this story really helped me remember what was important and what was not. First and foremost, be humble. Remember that we are all individuals who care about the world and we're doing our best. And what we're trying to do is very difficult and we're only one single person. And the only way we'll succeed is if it's a large group. Number two, practice falling. Change is hard. And so that means we're not going to succeed right away. We have to practice over and over and over again. And we're going to fall down over and over and over again. And every time you fall down, you need to get up and do it again. Flow with others. Again, give up this notion that you control everything. See what's happening with the whole system and move like the ants are moving when they're building anthills. And finally, take care of each other. When I think about Doug and the impact that he had on me and so many other people, he treated us well. He treated us with kindness. He cared about us. And that was so important. That meant so much to all of us. That encouraged us to want to go out into the world and make a difference. That's a real impact, taking care of each other, how we treat each other. I think it's so easy to forget that, but it's so important. It's something that we need to do. Be humble, practice falling, flow with others, take care of each other. Change is hard, but it's possible. 감사합니다.